Michael Saylor is at it again, this time talking about how crypto has officially changed according to the Library of Wealth. So we are going to look at what Michael Saylor had to say and give our take on it and see if we agree or disagree. Oftentimes, I do tend to agree with Michael Saylor on some things. However, I tend to disagree on some of other things he goes on about simply because I'm not in the same position he is. You got to keep in mind when you're listening to these influencers or these leaders in the world, where they're coming from, because that largely influences the way that they're telling their message as well as the kind of message they want to put out there. So let's take a look and see what Michael Saylor had to say this time.
Like Steve Jobs said, think different.
Think different. I agree. Library of Wealth.
Hey guys, welcome back to Library of Wealth. Today we have the CEO of MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor, talking about the issues in the crypto industry today. Saylor feels that Bitcoin is the best option for anyone who lives in a nation where they cannot trust the bank or local currency. The problem with currency in the long run is that even the strongest coin will lose 99.9% of its value over the next 100 years.
True.
Money all over the world is losing up to 40% of its value now, and the only reason there is no panic in the US is because the CPI is being manipulated to create the lowest possible inflation number. According to the CEO of MicroStrategy, Bitcoin has been negatively impacted by vulnerabilities and other assets in a market that is largely unregulated. Saylor has been under fire many times in the past few months over falling prices, volatility, and uncertainty. Let's get right into the interview with Michael Saylor, who will give us his take on the current state of the Bitcoin market.
So just a few things on that intro right there. He talked about how Michael Saylor is under attack because of the falling price of Bitcoin and the volatility and things like this. I think we talked about this before, that we're talking about the dollar, right? We're talking about US dollar. We're talking about something which has been manipulated, as you just said in the intro. So you have a dollar where its value is being manipulated with changing CPI values, and then yet we're talking about how Bitcoin is falling against this. Again, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. But if it's all about the dollar, then yeah, maybe that's a problem for you. But long term, you got to think about what's going on. And Michael Saylor's position, as I mentioned in the intro, is that he is the CEO, or was CEO actually, of the company that is in it for investors. And so their concern is seeing the increase in their value. In short term, if you have a short term outlook, that's hard to do. But if you have long term, you're good to go. And if you're actually understanding how these dollars and these fiat currencies are falling, you shouldn't really be going on about how the value of Bitcoin is falling against them. It isn't. It's actually holding up against them. But it's all a matter of how you paint the picture. So let's keep going.
We struggle with the challenge of authority. You know, Lord Acton said, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely.
And the only difference between absolute power today and absolute power 10,000 years ago is today we have a company that listens to everything a billion people say. Yikes. We have another company that answers the questions that 4 billion people ask. Yikes. We have companies that deliver the food and all of the goods that you need to survive to hundreds of millions of people. We have one company that delivers all of the business software to 80 million corporations.
Wow.
Indirectly serving billions and billions of employees.
Wow.
Now, I ask you the question, if you got ejected out of the third biggest country in the world, or if I denied you privileges to live in any of the 5 largest countries in the world, would your life go on? Probably.
Yeah.
Now, what if you actually got canceled by Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google tomorrow? The question is, would your life go on? Stop and think a little bit about what happens if they simply turned off your account, seized your photos, turned off your messages, took your documents. What if Microsoft just denied you access privileges? Could you run a business? Could you work? It's a big question. We've never had, I used to make the joke, Apple's the most valuable company in the world because there's never been a company in the world as valuable as Apple. It legitimately is the most valuable because it can change the lives of 1 billion people over the weekend by shipping some electricity. And that is not something we struggle with 100 years ago. So the question really is, what happens if this goes on? Companies get bigger, we got big tech, governments get bigger.
So he went from one question to another. What would happen if you got canceled? What would happen if your Facebook, your Google, your Microsoft account, your all these big social media accounts got taken offline? That they denied you access from being able to use these ever again. Do you think you could go on? I honestly, I could see how that would be very difficult, but I also see why it's so important to focus more on using self-hosted solutions. And I keep on emphasizing this with everything that we do. And a lot of people struggle with why I'm always going on about that. Because to them, it's just like, well, you could just use Google. It's all on Google. It's easy. Or they're just like, oh, I could just use my Apple account to do this. Oh, you just do this on Facebook. Why would you use something else? And the truth is that, well, yeah, if you could get into that, and then if it gets shut off or banned, which is happening left, right, and center to a lot of people these days, you lose, you get completely deplatformed. And at that point, how do you reach everybody? You don't. You're canceled. You effectively like might as well not exist as far as like the rest of the digital world is concerned. And that's very scary, considering that just a handful of companies have this kind of power. And so this is what he's asking. Can you live with that? Let us know in the comments if you think you could live with that. If you got completely canceled tomorrow, are you going to be able to continue to carry on business? Are you going to be able to carry on with even like, I guess, your life? Because so much of your ability to be able to get employed relies on having a digital presence, right? So yeah, I think it would be very difficult. Of course, if you have some technical prowess, you can get around that a little with hosting your own stuff, getting yourself your own domain, getting your own email, getting all these things set up and using open source software. But at the same time, if they really are canceling you, you're going to be barred out from a lot of the walled gardens, which are these tech giants, right? So anyways, just my thoughts on that before he started moving on to the next question, which is going into now. So let's see.
Serves 3 billion people, then that means one bureaucrat can make one phone call to that company and potentially turn off all of the information flowing to all 3 billion people over the weekend, right? Wow. This is it's a new idea, and it's a disturbing idea. The story of Atlas Shrugged is the story of individuals struggling against the collective, and eventually they realize it's a corrupt and a rigged game, and they can't succeed at it. And the solution that John Galt offers is to withdraw from the corrupt economy. So should we follow John Galt's example? Should we just withdraw from a corrupt economy? Can we? Well, obviously we haven't.
Saylor goes on to say that big banks are currently unable to issue stablecoins because they're unregistered securities, which puts a twist in the industry, but once licensed, will create a giant on-ramp in market capital. It would allow for tens of millions of transactions per day, which would provide massive potential for the crypto and stock markets.
In the 21st century,
let's pause right there.
You can choose where to locate.
So the comments that were just made there by the Wealth Library, talking about what Michael Saylor has talked about in terms of getting crypto regulated in order for lots of money to flow into the system. That was after Michael Saylor started to talk about John Galt's take, which is like disconnect from the system. Like, he's like, can we do that? He's like, obviously that hasn't happened, right? And it's true, it hasn't happened, but I disagree. Like, he actually didn't answer the question either. He just asked the question without giving the answer. then the Wealth Library steps in and gives their comments about how he talks about bringing money into the space. As far as disconnecting from the system is concerned, it is very, very difficult today. It is, hands down. However, things change very quickly. The ability for people to do that is becoming, I would say even in the last 5 years, it's become much easier. And the easier it gets, the harder it's going to be for the system to retain people in it, because they, as the video just talked about, as what Michael Saylor was talking about, was that people are disillusioned by seeing the game is rigged. We have no way, like they know that the system is corrupt, the game is rigged, they're not going to get ahead, so why continue? And the question is, maybe you should disconnect and get into something else. I think that's becoming easier, and I think more and more people are more attracted to that because they want to live in a world where they know it's not rigged. In a crypto world where everything is transparent, where the rules exist without rulers, you can imagine a world where that's possible. And that's not something that the current systems are offering. They're basically offering more of the same. And as people continue to see that, they just get more disillusioned and they look for other alternatives. So I don't think that, I disagree with Michael Saylor on this point that we need to have institutional money flowing into crypto. For where he's at, it is important. For the idea that the idea of the US dollar being against the US dollar value against Bitcoin and all of that happening, that will happen. And it'll probably happen anyway. I just don't think that as far as the end game is concerned, that's going to lead to a place where people are going to really want to stick around. Do you know what I mean? Like if the dollar value goes up, there will be so much. By the time that happens, so many people would have already left the dollar and be just living in crypto and Bitcoin and whatever, that it's not even going to matter. It's going to be left to the existing institutions, the old institutions that are still playing that game. And by then, there's this whole other, I don't know how to put it, a whole other group, a whole other organization, like different types of groups and organizations that have already emerged and created their own economies and things that they have more ownership in than they ever had in the current system. I think what Michael Saylor wants with this big inflow of institutional money is simply because of his position and what he has to do with MicroStrategies and with potentially his belief that this is how the system is going to transition, that he thinks that the system will, like a giant juggernaut, like, you know how hard it is for a juggernaut to make a move, right? Like it goes really slow. He's still in it to expect that this juggernaut's going to move along with this. And he thinks that it's just not going to have a choice. It's going to have to make these moves in order to be able to survive. And he's positioning himself in a way that he thinks will be beneficial to the company, to his shareholders, because that's what he has to do. I tend to disagree. His question to can you disconnect was kind of predicated on the idea that no, you can't. Like he's lining it up with like, what if you got canceled tomorrow? You'd be done. So no, you can't disconnect because you'd be done. Yeah, I don't know. I think like I said, it's getting easier. It's getting easier. There's alternatives that are just growing everywhere, like mushrooms, and they're hard to. You don't realize just how connected these mushrooms you see sprouting up everywhere are, and when it happens, it's already too late. Yeah. So, anyways, those are some of my thoughts on that. Let's keep going.
Locate your body, your friends and family. You can choose where to locate your mind. You can spend your time on Twitch or Netflix or YouTube or Reddit or reading whatever you like. There's infinite. You can be wherever you want to be with any group you want to be in cyberspace in your head. This is true. You can also choose where to locate your business.
That's right.
Your P&L, where do you generate cash flow in order to pay your expenses?
Yep.
You want that to be a streaming YouTube channel? You want that to be a bakery on Venice Beach? You choose. There are consequences. And finally, you can choose where to place your wealth. In March of 2020, the world came to a grinding halt. Suddenly, billions of people woke up to the prospect of an economic collapse, losing faith in their institutions and their governments. On August 10th, MicroStrategy, struggling with this existential crisis, adopts the Bitcoin standard. At that point, I concluded the road to serfdom is working exponentially harder for a currency growing exponentially weaker. And we saw an escape from economic slavery in the form of what we thought was digital gold. But as I've explained, it turned out to be much more than digital gold.
Pause for a second.
Bitcoin is something special.
So what he was saying was that the idea, the term he used was economic serfdom. Did you catch that? Like he's referring to us all being slaves in this economic system. And he saw Bitcoin as a way to be able to escape the economic serfdom. That's really a contrast to how most people see it, I think. I think most people don't realize that they are like slaves in a system. And when you say something like that, it seems so foreign to most people because they kind of go about their day to day and yeah, this is just what I do. And they don't realize that they are actually slaves to this economic system. There's a quote I remember not too long ago, and it said that the person who never moves doesn't realize the chains that are on their legs. And that's effectively what he's referring to. There's a system that just, you never move out of it. You don't realize just how chained you are to it and how limiting it is to you. Once you try to move, though, you find out. And people like Michael Saylor, they hit it all the time because they're moving all the time. And they realize just how enslaved they are. So that's pretty profound to when you think about it. So good stuff. Let's keep going.
Bitcoin network. Rather than removing your labor from a corrupt economy, you should remove your money from a corrupt economy.
Ooh.
Bitcoin's a protocol to create free ideas, free economies, and free assets beyond the control of corrupt institutions. It's a fast, fair, and equitable method to settle the differences of 8 billion people. We say in the Bitcoin world, fix the money, fix the world. Look, there's 20,000 cryptos. There's one that's 95% dominant, which is ethically sound, technically sound, economically sound. Bitcoin is reared in metal.
Bitcoin.
It's the hardest substance in the universe. Most people don't know it.
In the universe.
Most people are afraid of it. Never done that before.
I don't know. Aliens might disagree.
When we bought Bitcoin, we bought 250 million. No public company had ever bought any.
You look so young there.
People thought we were crazy. So then we bought another 175 million. People thought we were crazy. Then we bought 600 million more. People said, you can't stand on it. It'll destroy you. It's like standing on a bridge made of steel. And I concluded, it's the perfect engineered material to solve our problem, but people are living in fear. And how are we going to get them to not be fearful? And I was reminded of Andrew Carnegie's example. It's like build the bridge, go stand out in the middle of the bridge. You build an airplane, fly the airplane. Show people that it's not going to break. That's what MicroStrategy did. We said, well, if it's good for 100 million, it's good for 1 billion. If it's good for 1 billion, we might as well go for 4 billion. Right? And at some point, people will realize that they have more to fear by not embracing this technology than by embracing it. Right now, it's a $400 billion asset. There are $400 trillion of other assets floating around in our current fiat system.
Wow.
They're leaking energy. They're corrupt.
Ooh.
They're inefficient. They're controlled by the collective. Bitcoin's a union. The union gets more powerful as more people join.
Bitcoin's a union.
And in the war for the future of money, It's going to be won with money. As the money moves into the network, the monetary union gets more powerful. Everybody that joins the network has that much more power. And your only hope against the oppressive force of the collective is to unionize your own activities and organize your activities with people of like ideology that believe as you believe.
So Michael Saylor thinks that we shouldn't remove our work from the economy, but we should remove our money. So that means take all your whatever dollar, fiat, whatever you make money in per se, and move it into Bitcoin. That is his answer. I think that is sound advice coming from Michael Saylor. I think that the idea of not removing the work from the economy, but then moving the money is a specific strategy, which he refers to as a war, which is interesting. We are basically, when you do that, you're joining a union of Bitcoiners, I guess, or crypto enthusiasts that essentially are rallying against the collective. So I think that that's certainly something of a strategy you could employ. I think that you should look at ways to remove everything. I think that there's more opportunities now to do that. Right now, I would say removing your money via Bitcoin is an answer for what you could do today. So if you can take that step, like he's talking about, that's a good idea. I think that that's certainly a way to be able to have your part in the war, as he calls it. But if you, in terms of like how you work and how you produce and what your work productivity is concerned, that's a little more tricky. We're not there yet. However, I think that technology is catching up and there's going to be ways to do that. It's only been a couple of years that the whole digital economy has come about. So like in terms of like really being able to be as mobile and everything else as he was talking about, that wasn't even something I'd say 5 years ago, right? So things can change really, really fast. What's going to happen in the next 5 years remains to be seen. I think that we're going to see this trend continue towards decentralization. I think that the existing behemoths that we was referring to as the collective per se are going to continue to do as they do. And it's ultimately up to you what side you want to be on, I guess, in terms of what kind of future you want to create for yourself and your children. And that all comes down to the choices you make in your own personal world, right? So are you going to put your money into Bitcoin? The choice is yours. Make it a good one. So if you have any other thoughts on this, if you agreed with what Michael Saylor said and some of the things that I said that I didn't agree with, and you think that it's totally off, let us know. Like and subscribe this. Be sure to check out our other videos because we have given reactions to what some of these other people have said in the industry so that you got my thoughts on that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just leave it in the comments and maybe that will lead us to what we look at in the future. So till then, have a great day.